Well, I think we should try to understand sort of why greenwashing happens, and
Yeah.
then we can take a look at like some of the solutions are. And the reason why it's happening is because we've got something called green fatigue, where there's just a bunch of buzzwords like sustainability and green and high performance being thrown out there, and there's just a ton of it, and that's why we've got so much confusion because there's just too much information out there.
Hello, welcome to By Design. This is Jack Baldwin with Reynard Architectural Designs. I'm joined again by my very good friend Farah. We are continuing our conversation on sustainability spotlight. Farah is not only a good friend that I've connected with this year, but she is a lead accredited architect based in the New York City area. She's joining us again for our third sustainability spotlight. Farah, how are you today?
Jack, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to have you, and I hope you're staying warm up there in cold New York City.
Oh yeah, it's getting cold, but hey, this is what we're used to, and I think we're sort of seeing the effects of climate change with the shift of seasons and peaks, but what can you do?
Yeah. Last time we connected, we talked about one of our projects that we designed, and we talked about passive design and thermal mass and just how you orient homes, how you design with a strategy in mind for how to capture as much energy efficiency as possible. That was really fun. And it was really cool to get to go through an actual home that we designed beat for beat. And a lot
Yep.
of our clients loved it. So thank you for doing that with us. That was really fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of homeowners that have checked it out got some feedback on how to incorporate passive design in a cost-effective manner, and so would encourage anyone that hasn't seen that video to check it out and get some tips.
Yeah, we'll drop that back in the notes so we can revisit that. But other than that, Farah, I think you and I are both excited because today's actually 11 a.m. Eastern time. The first World Cup match got started. So thanks for taking time away from watching the match to talk with me. I know you'll probably get to watch it later this afternoon.
It's airing tomorrow, so
Okay.
we are good.
Okay.
But you and I were talking about the hype of the World Cup, so we're kind of in that mode already.
Yeah.
We'll be prepared.
Okay. So you're not missing anything.
No, no.
The game is just happening. Okay, I gotcha.
Yep.
So do you have any bold predictions before we get started? Any World Cup bold predictions?
I'm rooting for Team USA as my first choice and Portugal as choice number two, but I think it's going to come down to France
Oh,
uh,
really?
and Argentina. I'm kind of putting my bets on one of those two teams and Germany. I think those are the top contenders,
Okay.
but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think I saw your bracket on Twitter.
Yep.
So, well, cool. I'm hoping when we reconnect in December, we'll see some of those predictions come true.
Let's see what happens.
I'd love to see U.S. men's go a little bit farther. So,
Yep.
well, thanks for joining me today. We decided to talk about the topic of greenwashing, and just a little bit of context. We hear that word green or sustainability thrown around quite a bit. And so the effort today is to put a little bit more, kind of some more definition, some more context around it. And so you came to me with the idea of talking about greenwashing, and
Mhm.
that got my attention. So let's just start there. How do we define that? What do we mean when we say greenwashing? What are we referring to?
Yeah, greenwashing it's really just the act of misleading consumers or promoting a product or a service as being green when there might not be any substantial evidence behind it. And it's just become so overly saturated in the content that we're seeing. So we see that in many different forms, and we'll get through that today. But it's something that I'm personally passionate about, and I think it's not specific to the technical professionals, but I think this is something that greenwashing has just become such a confusing scheme, really. It's a marketing ploy or a
Yeah.
scheme. It's just, it's to the point where there's so much information out there and there's all these buzzwords that are being thrown about. And so the point of today is to really clarify what is actually green? What's the true definition of sustainability and how do we get back to that? So we're going
Well,
to empower homeowners today.
yeah, well, the term green and sustainable, those are value words, so they play on a core personal value, which I know you're very passionate about. That's why you take time on a
Mhm.
Saturday, like you did today, to talk about this, because there's value and there's passion attached to that. And so, like anything that people put value in, sometimes there's manipulation, and sometimes there's facades that are put on those values that don't actually have any substance to them. So
Exactly.
I'm going to pull up an image that you shared with me that you selected, that I think is kind of representative of this. So I look at this picture and I'm like, oh, that's a really cool building. Um,
Mhm.
but if we peel back the layers a little bit, what's happening here?
Yeah, so this is a 27-story tower in Mumbai, a residential luxury building. And this was marketed as this, massively environmental effort, an eco tower, you could call it, or
Yeah.
that's how it was advertised. But really, this green wall system that they're talking about and these hanging gardens that they also have cantilevering out,
Yeah.
these are just add-on gimmicks, I would call them.
Yeah.
They're not contributing anything to the environment. So while they're claiming to be bringing nature into the building, there was an excessive fund and excessive resources and energy and emissions that were consumed in order to create this building. And so
Yeah.
this is not a green building. And this is an exaggerated example, but it's one that we've seen thrown out by luxury firms all over the world. You think of architecture and you think of high tech and you see images like this flashing. And what's happening is everyone is making environmental claims, right? And
Mhm.
it's becoming too much of like a money grab. So are there actual environmental results or is this just another gimmick? So
It's
let's
cosmetic.
compare.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's cosmetic. We in the South we say you can put lipstick on a pig. But I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, where's the substance here? Like,
Hmm.
what's the substance of green? So this image is really helpful for kind of showing us a very literal way in which we're putting something green on top of something and
Yep.
calling it green. But what I'm excited about is, as we keep talking, we're going to peel back some definitions. So
Hmm.
um, and get into like how do we actually define that? So that's my next question. Like, where do we start defining that? Are there certifications? How do we see that in building products? How do you know something is actually green instead of just seeing, you know, plants actually stuck to a building? How do we certify that?
Yep. And Jack, you hit on some really good points there. And just to answer that, I think there's three target areas that we can take a look at today. One, building products, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Two, building certification programs.
Mhm.
And then the third one, something that I've experienced a lot as what I would call myself an eco traveler is in the hospitality industry. And so
Right.
let's kind of hit on those sectors and just to scale back a little bit, the reason why we're talking about green buildings and greenwashing and sort of like this deceptive scheme is because greening buildings is important, right? Let's just get back to the basics here. We
Yeah.
know that buildings are responsible for 40% of, global energy consumption. In the US, they're responsible for over half of our total greenhouse gas emissions. And then globally, they're responsible for 50% of CO2 emissions. So that environmental impact that the building industry has,
Yeah.
it's so important to capture and go back to the true meaning of sustainability and to really measure performance and measure results and not get caught up in this scheme is what I would call it. So
Yeah.
let's let's go into building products. You
Okay.
asked where we could see some of this. And so I want to talk a little bit about greenwashing and building products. And while there's no universal definition that would capture what a green product is, just because there are so many different definitions, there are certain things that we can do as responsible consumers, as homeowners, that can help us verify what is truly green. And so if we start with building products, first thing you want to definitely do is take a look at any labels that are listed on your products. And so this is one example here of an Energy Star,
Yeah.
energy efficient product. We see this label on windows and other appliances and products. But if you see a label, that's first of all, it's always a good sign because you've got a verified authority that is going through that certification. But the next step for you to do is to go through a database. And so if you see what's being shown here, this list of Energy Star efficient products, you're able to actually go into any of these categories of products that are linked here and take a even closer look at how it was certified and what are the specs, more importantly, what are the specifications of that product that make it a green, sustainable, and durable product. And so you can look at the energy efficiency, and so again, I would urge someone that, once you've captured a seal and you see that there's a verified authority that has certified that a product is green, then I would just take a second step, go onto the database, something like this, and just verify that that product is still certified. That's the first step for sure, is just to make sure that that certification is valid. And keep in mind that products are always changing, specifications are always changing. Energy Star has its own list of guidelines for when something might need to get recertified. If a product is discontinued, maybe it no longer meets federal standards. And so is that product still certified to today's energy standards? Maybe not. Maybe it's still out on the market, but it just isn't to the current standard. So
Right.
again, going to that database online and checking your product before you purchase it to make sure it's still valid and that there isn't a more efficient model of that particular product out there is a good first step.
Yeah, and this is low-hanging fruit because Energy Star is very commonly recognized. You walk into any Home Depot, you're going to recognize that label, that blue logo that's on so many products, washers and dryers, like you said, windows, lights. There's so many products that we see every single day that have this logo on it. But to your point, as the codes and as the certification process becomes updated, I think you're right. This is, find out what's more current. And this is
Mhm.
just energystar.gov where you can start. That's very easy to get to. It's easy to remember.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is low hanging fruit. If you're just like, is this actually sustainable? Is this giving me the kind of ratings that I want? Um,
Exactly.
for our people, I'd say new homes, like that's who we work with, or people who are doing custom homes. So we care a lot about whether or not these products that are going into these new homes, what are they actually contributing in terms of very measurable ways. So yeah, that's a great place to start. I'm glad that you prompted us to have the conversation here at Energy Star because it's recognizable,
Yep.
and it's not something hard to find. It's not that hard to just do a little bit of research to get the ball rolling. What stuff's out there and what can I do to make sure that I'm getting the best that I can.
Yep. And later on, I'll get into a little bit more detail about certification programs and what to look out for. But for sure, that first point that I want to hit home is make sure you check your product and make sure that it's still certified under the current database and that, again, there isn't a more upgraded model of that.
And so let's talk about the certification process itself. Like, where can you find some of that technical information that's reliable if you're wanting to go another layer into certifications? I've pulled
You
up
know,
a link that you shared with me here. What is this?
yes. So the next step is to make sure with a building product that once you take a look at the certification that's listed on that product, you want to make sure you have a lot of technical information that's publicly transparent to back the certification. So if we have something that's certified with Cradle to Cradle,
Mhm.
and I'm not endorsing any one certification or seal versus another. I just want to give you a sense of what sort of information is out there and what to look for
Right.
to make sure that something's more legitimate versus maybe another seal or stamp. But Cradle to Cradle, if you take a look at, let's say you see a product, you see the Cradle to Cradle seal, you're like, okay, well, let me take a look and see what this is about. So you go on this website and they're very transparent about how the product is certified and how to determine, for example, as we see there, if your product is eligible for certification. And if you go onto that resources tab that's listed there,
Yeah.
you go down, so you're going to see a lot of reference documents here that gives a little bit more information on the testing that's done. For example, emissions, VOC content limits, what's thrown out there for the product as far as its impact on air quality. There's transparent guidance documents. There's a very friendly user guide that we see here. And actually, if you can go to that next link, Jack,
Yeah.
we'll take a look at that user guide that's available for the Cradle to Cradle certification. It should be on the next tab.
So yeah, now we're looking at the user guide from Cradle to Cradle. What do we would need to know about this user guide, Farah?
So the fact that this user guide is available to the public, first of all, is an awesome sign that this is a legitimate certification. So if you see something like this, where you can see that the standards are documented and what's required to be documented in order for that product to be certified, then you know that there are a lot of different layers of accountability for this particular product. And
Yeah.
if you can scroll up to the table of contents, I just want to show you a sense of, or just provide you with a sense of what's available in this guide. So if you go to the next page, you can see like, I'm sorry, if you could just scroll back up, might have misguided you there. Yep. So there's a lot of specific information here on the label product requirements. There's definitions. They're basically creating a technical user guide for the user, something that you would probably expect to see on the back end, like the technical professionals that are involved behind creating the certification program. But they're telling you, they're laying out for you step by step what it takes to become certified. And so if I see something like this on a database, I'm going to trust that they're holding that particular product accountable. You know, that manufacturer has its requirements, person developing the product has to keep this in mind. So this is a great sign.
Yeah, and this is easy to find too, and this is a new one for me, Cradle to Cradle, but
Mhm.
it's so encouraging to know that there's a I'm gonna go back to that, tab we were just looking at, but the, certified resources here. What are their standards? What are their methodologies? Um, what what measurements are they using to test things? So, when you have third-party organizations like this that are making their resources, publicly available, and it's not that complicated. It's it's actually pretty user friendly to go through these things, and
Yep,
take a moment or two just to kind of see like where's that information coming from? How do I know about the veracity of it?
yep. And on the website that we just saw, there was also a link for finding products. So going back again to being able to find a database that you're able to just check to see if the product is truly certified, this
Uh-huh.
website has it. So
Yeah. So I
again,
got a
always check.
product. I already picked it out. I know that I want it in my home, before I even get to construction. And we do a really good job at our firm of going through the design and the build process early with people so that we can start naming materials, start naming products, start naming appliances before we even go to construction. This is a really huge resource for people who are thinking about long-term sustainability for their home and the impact that it's going to have, but also total cost of ownership as
Mhm.
they living in these homes before you've even gone to Home Depot to pick it out or wherever you're selecting your products from. Test them here. And the information is public and it's easy to find. You've got third parties. You've got more than just one place that you can get that certification from. So this is an awesome resource. I'm glad you directed us this way.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's talk about another building product. Or actually, I think we were going to go back to another um, Cradle to Cradle, another and
Yeah, just one more point that I wanna hit on it, and it's on this website. There's another tab that you may have open, Jack, but it's a way to find an assessor for Cradle to Cradle.
yes.
So basically, this website will allow you to find a local person that is certified to, or certified to assess the product to make sure that, again, it is Cradle to Cradle certified. So there's like a network of professionals that you can turn to that will verify this for you, like a third party certification sort of thing that we have here. And again, just provides another layer of credibility.
Right. So building products, we're going to talk about another very common building product that a lot of people, especially in our area, will probably recognize
Hmm.
because of the Pink Panther. Good branding, great marketing. But one of the things I noticed when I look at this is a very common piece of foam insulation that goes into a lot of homes. In fact, some of our clients, I've seen them install this in various places throughout their home. And one of the things that catches my eye right away, apart from Mr. Pink Panther, is this rating right here. So first of all, if you don't mind indulging me just a bit and tell me what's an R rating, why is it important? What does this R rating mean? And is there something else I should know about this product?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about greenwashing within the industry.
Mhm.
But basically, we're looking at the insulation value, which is your R value that's listed on the product. And this is a 2-inch thick board, which is rated at R5 per inch. So this is an R10 uh, insulating value. So that's what that represents.
Okay.
Something that's kind of a red flag, not necessarily a red flag, but just not necessarily in large print is this caution label that we've got at the bottom of the insulation board. And if you take a magnifying lens and you read through that,
Yeah.
it'll actually say that the R value that's listed on the board is rated for a certain temperature only. And that standard is typically 75 degrees. So what does that mean? It means that your insulating value for this particular building product is at R10, but only if you are at a temperature of 75 degrees. So, I call this out as greenwashing to some sense because you can spec out for your home or building an R10 insulation board, but it's actually not going to perform at that value because certain insulation types will improve as, let's say, the temperatures drop, and then certain insulation types will get worse when it's cold outside.
Yeah.
Polyiso insulation, for example, its insulation value will decrease, as much as a quarter of to as much as a quarter of the R value when the temperature drops, which is pretty bad. Other insulation types will actually improve as it gets colder outside. Fiberglass bad insulation, expanded polystyrene, which is what you typically would see in a structural insulated panel or for roof and wall sheathing. But again, we don't want to take these insulating values at face value. We want to be aware of what the insulating value of this product is at its actual tested performance. And so that might mean you may need to add more insulation to get your what's called your effective R value versus what's called your rated R value or it's originally listed as.
Yeah.
So just another red flag to be aware of.
Well, it's easy, especially if you're trying to achieve something. If you go and I think this kind of I'm glad you pointed this out because it really does play on people's best intentions. They're really wanting to get good R value out of their home, not just to keep it warm, but to reduce cost and reduce carbon footprint. They have uh, altruistic goals, let's say, and they're really seeking out these good R values so they can feel good when they pick out this type of insulation, but that that caution is so small and it's not easy to find. So I can see a homeowner really easily getting excited about improving the R value of their home and reducing energy costs, and yet not seeing that fine print. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things, and I think your point here is whether it's not to trash these products or say that they're not
Mhm.
good, but not taking everything for face value and not taking everything for granted, because it's kind of doing a little bit of homework, a little bit of research. Doesn't take that long to just pull back a little bit more to find out, like, can I really trust what's being sold to me? Can I test that and find
Mhm.
out if it really is delivering on the promises?
Right. And how can I be a more informed homeowner and really do my research before I take something at face value? And
Right.
again, it's listed, but if you didn't know about the product or know about this, you wouldn't have even thought to think about that. So,
Yeah. And that brings kind of the next point. So spec sheets. Spec sheets are huge in construction. It's what we use as a design firm. We deliver spec sheets on materials to contractors. Part of the design process is delivering a good one so that when you go to build, you have something you can pull from that's identified pricing, color, finishes, all the materials that go into a full spec sheet. Now, this spec sheet you shared with me as a spec sheet we don't really want to rely on when it comes to our value and our ratings. Why is this not a helpful spec sheet, Farah?
yeah, so this spec sheet doesn't have much information about the actual product itself. We see that there's a nominal thickness and we see that there's a thermal R value that's prescribed to it.
Yeah.
but there's not a lot of information on what the effective R value might be, or just other information about the product. So if we can compare this to another spec sheet that I just want to take another look at, this particular one happens to be from iStone. This is with their marketing, they've branded sustainability and they've gone through recycled content for this particular product. But once we get past some of these buzzwords, if you go through the spec sheet, you'll see that there's actually a lot more information about the recycled content. So we see right there on that page, it talks a little bit about how this product can contribute to a lead project, which again, we don't want to necessarily take that at face value. That's something you do want to verify, because
Mhm.
you'll see that quite a bit, that this will contribute to lead. But, if we do a little bit more research and we look at some of these specs, this is something more, of like what I would want to see versus the other spec sheet that we were looking at. So there's
Yeah.
information on the test standards listed here. ASTM, we know that that's a national standard that prescribes performance values. Product can meet this, and this. We know that offhand standard, there shouldn't be any issues meeting this. Um, this is the kind of information you want to make sure is readily available to you, versus maybe a table that just has your thickness and your R value without much context, and which might require you to do a lot more digging. It's kind of like having a marketing brochure versus something that's a bit more of a technical guide. And sometimes the manufacturers will post the technical specs on their website, and other times it's just a marketing brochure. You ask them, this is a red flag, but you might call up a manufacturer and ask them for some product information, and the first thing they'll do is give you that marketing brochure, without the specs to accompany it, because they'll just assume you're not interested or you don't want to know. But you should take a look and ask them what certifications have been achieved. And actually, if you just scroll right back up there to the, yep, we can see right here that Cradle to Cradle certified label, for instance, is right there. So already we know we've got that backing, and then we've got a few other certifications that are listed there as well.
Yeah.
And certification programs, all of them have their pros and cons. So if you've got multiple certification programs tied to one product, then one program might be compensating for something that another one isn't, and it's just kind of like another cross check.
So cool. Yeah, Farah, that's a great conversation to have if you're when you're picking out your interiors, when you're picking out your materials, and you're going through spec sheets. This is a really good way to think that through, so that you're just doing a little bit of extra research, and it's just knowing what to look for, I think, is the big takeaway here. If this is a recycled product and it is a good sustainable product, how do I know that? And you've pointed out some really good things that help us know where to look, just to make sure that we're actually getting what we're paying for. So I think that's awesome. But let's talk a little bit more about the building certification programs. There, as you mentioned, there's a lot. There's Green Building Council. There's Cradle to Cradle. What are some of the good ones? Which ones do we want to kind of be on the lookout for?
So I think when it comes to greenwashing with building certification programs, what we want to focus in on is some of the parameters that guide certification programs, and which ones might be red flags for greenwashing and which ones might be more legitimate.
Yeah.
Some of the controversy behind all of these new green building certification programs that have popped up is that they might not be legitimate because, for example, they might not be flexible. So, for example, there's prescriptive requirements and you have to follow that particular program to the book. But there might be interpretation that's needed. For example, if a project is located in a specific climate zone or specific locale, that certification program might not allow you to adopt your performance standards to that particular climate zone or locale. And so that might be one that you don't want to go for. Um, with building certification programs, you also want to look at something that has legitimacy in terms of who's backing it. So, is this a program that's been developed to give you economic incentives, and it's been developed by maybe, let's say, private investors or real estate boards or property developers? And has it been backed by a government program? Has it been funneled into law or code?
Mhm.
If it's been funneled into law or code, you would think that there is more legitimacy as far as the results of that program. Maybe the performance, energy, or water or materials results of that particular certification program are giving you more credible results versus some program that is out there to benefit someone for monetary reasons. And so you
Yeah.
kind of want to look at the drivers behind that certification program. How was it developed? How many homes or projects have been certified under it? When was it first established? And then another point I want to hit in on is with green building certification programs, another red flag for greenwashing is looking for certified assessors and not self-certification.
Right.
And so what do I mean by that? If a green building certification program is telling you that you can sign off on it without a third party verifying that it's performing as it was intended to for its energy goals, then you kind of want to have that third party verifications, a professional that tells you like, okay, this is great versus something that you just quickly sign off and seal and submit. If you don't have a third party that's required to verify your results, that's a huge red flag for
Right.
sure.
Right.
And again, this is something that we need to be on the lookout for. And with certification programs now, a lot of building codes are actually starting to bake these requirements in. You'll see some of the local codes now will have some of the requirements for green certification. So the passive house program, for example, it
Mhm.
gives you a numerical value. You have to meet this for your heating loads. You have to meet this for your cooling loads. Your overall performance has to be this value. And so like those performance values are baked into regulatory criteria.
Yeah.
Uh, so that to me would give a program legitimacy because it's been tried and tested. You know, you also, one big irker for me is when a green building markets itself as being green, but they're just advertising the things that are already required. So
Yeah.
you want to look at, you know, let me try to find a prime example of this. In New York City, for example, we've got sustainable roofing zones, which require a PV or a green roof. And let's say a building comes out and are like, hey, we're going green, we're going above standard, we've got PV systems, but hey, buddy, it's required, it's law. you know,
Right.
Take a look at what's already out there. That's not a high performance building. That's
You're
just standard.
bragging about meeting the minimum standard, but
Exactly. That's all it is. Yep.
yeah, but that's why it's so important to have these conversations because um, this kind of goes back to an earlier conversation we had. Like I think our first podcast we talked about empowering people with information. So a homeowner, it's so great that somebody like you has gone through so much of the research and the preparation and the advice so that when people are looking, they are feeling empowered. They can ask better questions and they can go to multiple sources too. They're feeling empowered. And that kind of brings me into my next part, being empowered as a traveler. You mentioned green travel. We our company, all of us, we love to travel. Kaylin, my business partner, just got back from Switzerland,
Nice.
but we love to think about how are we participating in the hospitality industry in a way that's green. um, what's happening in greenwashing in the hotel industry that we should be thinking about as we travel? Like, what are they doing that should be a red flag for us?
I think the hospitality industry is a big culprit of this because I feel like in the last 7 or 8 years, whenever I've traveled, I've seen a lot more signage in the rooms. So they're indicating that it's a green hotel, but their operations don't necessarily match. So, for example, you'll see signs about, I don't know, towel reuse, but then you've got a dirty towel in your hotel room and someone's picking it up and replacing it right away. There's no communication there whatsoever.
Yeah,
Uh, I think I think we have to be really wary of that. If you're picking a hotel based on, um, let's say it's green premise, you have to be really wary that the operations match was listed and maybe hold the hotel accountable and tell them, hey, I'm trying to be green. I'm trying to reuse my towels. Don't replace them right away. But I just want people to be aware that there is a lot of signage in hotels, but oftentimes there's no enforcement. Something that is enforced, one example of a hotel that's truly following it, you see automatic controls for lighting. I stayed at a hotel in Maui where when you shut off the when you opened up your balcony door, the air conditioning would just shut off right away. I thought that was a great sync of building
yeah,
systems. And then there was a lot of signage on the property to educate people about some of the benefits of recycling, and there were statistics. I
yeah,
have to give a shout out to the the I think it was the Hyatt Regency in Maui for this, but they did a great job of just educating the people on the property and placing the signage on pathways so that people could leisurely just look at it and always be reminded. I think that's a great way of matching a hotel's products, services, and operational activities with the campaign of going green versus just placing a sticker or a label on there and not following up.
Yeah, so those are proofs. I mean, those are things you can kind of add some veracity to as you're observing, and that's great. That if you just know what to look for or kind of open your eyes a little bit, you'll start seeing evidence.
Hmm.
If you're allowing yourself to kind of start being aware.
Hmm.
So, are there any other proofs, or there are any other things that, whether it's building product or hospitality or in the construction process, just anything else you can touch on that people can be thinking about, that it's like, oh yeah, that actually gives me some evidence that these claims are being backed up by practice, by rating, by certification, or what other things should we be looking for?
Well, I think we should try to understand sort of why greenwashing happens, and
Yeah,
then we could take a look at like some of the solutions are. And the reason why it's happening is because we've got something called green fatigue, where there's just a bunch of buzzwords like sustainability and green and high performance being thrown out there, and there's just a ton of it. And that's why we've got so much confusion because there's just too much information out there. And then another reason it happens, and this is in regards to certification programs specifically, but a lot of these green certification programs, which, some, I won't say a lot, but some of them they're kind of culprits of greenwashing because they certify their projects based on their construction documents, but not the actual performance of the building. There's no follow-up after the building has been occupied to see if it's
right.
still meeting those standards or have the standards, basically veered off, or has its performance has gone off the rails? Has it declined? Have they changed their design since? And has anyone reassessed that property? And so for reasons like this, greenwashing is happening. And so you asked, what are some of the things that we can look out for? What can we do as homeowners to be more cautious of this and be more prepared? And first thing I would say is definitely look to your building science professionals, that's your architects or builders, to tell you about the actual substance of the product or the certification program and projects that they've worked with in the past that have used these particular products or certification programs. And then going back to what we were looking at the first half of this episode is just to look out for third-party certifications. So if you can't readily reach a professional, you can do informational research on yourself. You can take a look at, you can go beyond the marketing brochure and look for certifications. Look for third-party verification of a certification, not self-certified, and make sure that there is a public database. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And you just have to make sure that there are assessors out there and a database of products to make sure that, again, that product, that certification is still valid to this day. And
Yeah.
then just understand simply that something that's branded as sustainable may not incorporate all aspects of sustainability. So understand, for example, an energy efficient product, it's not one that is also recycled or extracted responsibility. It's just that maybe it's just its energy efficiency that makes it sustainable, but it's not meeting the whole complete picture of sustainability, right?
Yeah.
So a green construction material isn't green if it's being delivered from hundreds of miles away instead of locally. So that's something to just be aware of. I think just having that awareness will kind of make you more cautious. And also just note that a lot of design firms, they might be overselling the green aspect. This green, it's not a separate add-on. It should already be built into their construction best practices and their
Right.
design standards. It should already be the norm. So if you feel like you're being oversaturated with a green concept of a building as kind of like this add-on service, just hold your professional accountable and say, hey, this is already a standard. You should already be doing this. What more can we do beyond that to make this even better? And it comes down to really just something that we talked about in our last episode is taking a look at your current project and reducing what you're already doing, creating this manageable footprint, looking to your passive design features, reusing what's already existing, whether it's the structure or products that you can reuse, and then going ahead and looking to technologies or other products to offset that load. And, I just want to emphasize that I've gone to a bunch of building trade shows and I've been told that, for example, this is the best product out of its competitors, but you've got to do your research and compare
Yeah.
products. The
Well,
information sometimes is out there and sometimes it isn't.
yeah, and that's kind of the challenge. It's a bell curve, right? Because there's so much information, but there's also gets to a point where there's so much information that it's too onerous, and you start not paying attention because it's so ubiquitous. And so why I think this conversation is so helpful is that you've done some of that research and taken something that can be a little daunting and overwhelming, and really distilling it for us and pointing us in the right direction, because a lot of times we just don't know where to look. We don't know how to peel back the label sometimes, or when we do peel back the label, we're like, well, what does that mean? Why is that good or bad? And so it's a continual conversation. I think asking the right questions is always the biggest thing. And sometimes we don't know which questions to ask. So really just grateful for you pointing us in that direction of what questions should we be asking? What certifications matter? Why do they matter? Why does third party matter? Where are we getting our information from? Maybe sometimes peeling back and looking just a little bit closer to what's on that label, as you just pulled up and showed us, like something right there in front of you is so easy to miss just because of where it's placed. And our eyes are attached to the marketing. Marketing is great. I love to market. I do that for our company all the time, but we want to have some integrity to it. So I think you did a really great job of helping us kind of ask some good questions and bringing some integrity to the conversation. So I really appreciate that, Farah.
Yeah, I hope that, thank you, Jack. I hope that homeowners become more empowered, and this is kind of going to become our catchphrase now, empowerment of homeowners, but
I like
that they
that.
become empowered to just look beyond the communications materials that are out there and do a
Yeah,
little bit more digging.
cool. Well, thanks for joining us. I can't wait for our next conversation. I believe that's going to be in December. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving if that's your thing. And we will reconnect soon.
Great, thank you, Jack. Appreciate it.